The incident report blamed me for triggering the $250,000 OSHA fine through inadequate safety documentation. The federal investigator's case file included my internal complaint from 6 weeks earlier, warning that the violations existed and were being ignored. I'd submitted the safety concern to my supervisor on July 15th. I'd documented 3 separate violations of federal workplace safety standards. I'd included photos, dates, and specific regulation citations. My supervisor had responded on July 18th. These items are within acceptable operational parameters. No action required. The OSHA inspection happened on August 28th, unannounced. The inspector found all 3 violations I'd documented. The fine was issued on September 2nd. My supervisor's incident report to management was dated September 5th. It stated that I had failed to maintain proper safety documentation and that my negligence had led to the regulatory action. The OSHA investigator's case file, which I obtained through a FOIA request, included my July 15th internal complaint. The investigator had noted, "Employee reported these specific violations internally 6 weeks prior to inspection. Management response indicated no corrective action would be taken." My name is Diana. I worked as a safety compliance analyst at a manufacturing facility in Baltimore. I monitored workplace conditions. I documented safety violations. I filed reports when federal standards weren't being met. I'd been doing this work for 4 years without any regulatory fines or citations. Then my supervisor ignored my safety warnings. OSHA found exactly what I'd reported, and he blamed me for the fine. I opened my documentation file and started organizing the timeline. I had my July 15th internal complaint. 3 safety violations, detailed documentation, photos of each issue, citations of the specific OSHA regulations being violated. Violation 1. Inadequate machine guarding on the stamping press in Building C. OSHA Regulation 1910.212A1 required point-of-operation guarding. The press had none. Violation 2. Blocked emergency exits in the assembly area. OSHA Regulation 1910.36D prohibited obstructions in exit routes. Pallets of materials were stacked directly in front of 2 exits. Violation 3. Missing fall protection on the mezzanine level. OSHA Regulation 1910.29B1 required guardrails on elevated platforms over 4 feet. The mezzanine was 12 feet high, with no guardrails on the north side. I'd documented all 3 in my July 15th complaint. I'd sent it to my supervisor with supervisor, measurements, and regulation citations. His July 18th response: "These items are within acceptable operational parameters. No action required." I'd saved that email immediately. The OSHA inspector had found all 3 violations during the August 28th inspection. The citation listed each one separately. $85,000 for the machine guarding, $90,000 for the blocked exits, $75,000 for the fall protection. Total fine, $250,000. My supervisor's September 5th incident report blamed my inadequate safety documentation for the fine. But the OSHA case file showed the inspector had my July 15th complaint. Someone had filed it with OSHA before the inspection. I hadn't filed it, but someone had. I documented the timeline and saved all the materials. Then I continued my normal safety compliance work. I didn't defend myself against the incident report. I didn't explain the documentation I'd provided. I just maintained my regular inspection schedule and waited. 3 days after the incident report, I received a meeting invitation from my supervisor and the plant manager, scheduled for September 12th. Subject line: Safety Performance Review. I accepted the meeting and prepared copies of my documentation. The September 12th meeting was held in the plant manager's office. My supervisor opened the conversation. "We're reviewing the circumstances that led to the OSHA fine," he said. "We need to understand why these violations weren't identified and corrected before the inspection." I waited. "You're responsible for safety compliance documentation. Why weren't these issues flagged?" "They were flagged," I said. "I submitted a detailed report on July 15th, documenting all 3 violations." I provided a copy of my July 15th complaint. My supervisor reviewed it briefly. "This report indicates the items were within operational parameters." "That was your response to my report. My original complaint identified them as violations." I showed them both documents side by side. My complaint listing the violations, his response saying no action was required. The plant manager read both carefully. "You documented these specific violations in July?" "Yes, 6 weeks before the OSHA inspection." "And the response was that no action was required?" "Correct." The plant manager looked at my supervisor. "Why wasn't corrective action taken?" My supervisor hesitated. "I determined the items were within acceptable risk tolerance." "OSHA didn't agree with that determination," the plant manager said. "I made a judgment call based on operational needs." The plant manager made notes, but didn't respond further. The termination ended without resolution. I returned to my work and continued documenting. 2 days later, I received an email from the plant manager requesting all my safety documentation from the past 12 months. I provided everything within 3 hours. The plant manager didn't explain why he wanted the documentation. I just sent it and waited. On September 20th, I received a certified letter at home. It's such from OSHA. They were requesting my participation in their investigation of the facility. The letter stated that my internal complaint had been provided to OSHA and had triggered their inspection. They wanted to interview me about the safety conditions I'd documented. I contacted an employment attorney before responding. The attorney reviewed the timeline and documentation. "Someone at your facility filed a complaint with OSHA using your documentation," she said. "That's what triggered the inspection." "I didn't file it." "I know, but whoever did used your July 15th complaint as the basis. OSHA is treating you as the whistleblower." "What does that mean for me?" "You're protected under OSHA's whistleblower protection provisions. Your employer cannot retaliate against you for the complaint, even if you didn't personally file it. If they try to discipline or terminate you with legal recourse." My supervisor already filed a report blaming me for the fine. That could be considered retaliation. Document everything. Cooperate with the OSHA investigation. If the company takes any adverse action, we have grounds for a complaint. I agreed to cooperate with OSHA and scheduled the interview for September 25th. The OSHA interview was conducted at a location away from the facility. The investigator asked detailed questions about each violation, the timeline of my internal reporting, and my supervisor's response. I provided everything. My July 15th complaint, my supervisor's July 18th response, photos and documentation of each violation. The investigator reviewed it all carefully. "Your internal complaint is detailed and accurate," she said. "Every violation you documented matched what we found during our inspection." "I submitted it 6 weeks before your inspection." "We know, Someone filed it with our office on August 20th. That's what prompted our inspection. Do you know who filed it? The complaint was anonymous, but it included your documentation verbatim. Someone with access to your report provided it to us. Not me. We understand that, but your employer may not make that distinction. If they retaliate against you, file a whistleblower complaint immediately. The interview ended. I documented the conversation and returned to work. I didn't tell my supervisor or the plant manager about the OSHA interview. I just continued my regular duties. On October 3rd, I received another meeting invitation. My supervisor, the plant manager, and the HR director, scheduled for October 8th. Subject line: employment discussion. I accepted the meeting and prepared for potential termination. The October 8th meeting included all 3 managers. The HR director opened the conversation. We're addressing several concerns about your performance and your role in the recent OSHA citation. I waited. Your supervisor has documented concerns about your safety oversight and the adequacy of your compliance work. I documented 3 safety violations in July. My supervisor determined no action was required. OSHA found those same violations in August and issued a fine. My documentation was accurate. The plant manager interrupted. We've reviewed the timeline. Your July 15th report was accurate and detailed. The decision not to take corrective action was not yours. My supervisor started to respond. The plant manager continued. We've also been informed by OSHA that an anonymous complaint was filed using your documentation. Whether or not you filed it, your internal report was accurate and should have been acted on. The HR director made notes. We're restructuring the safety reporting process, the plant manager said. Going forward, all safety violations will be escalated directly to me, not just to department supervisors. I nodded. We're also revising the September 5th incident report. It incorrectly characterized your role in the citation. The meeting shifted. The HR director spoke next. We'd like to offer you a revised position, Safety Compliance Manager. You'd report directly to the plant manager, with authority to implement corrective actions without supervisor approval. What happened to my current supervisor? The plant manager responded. He'll no longer be in your reporting chain. The safety function will be independent of production operations. I considered the offer. What about the incident report, blaming me for the fine? It will be formally retracted and removed from all files. And the OSHA fine? The company is appealing portions of the fine, but we acknowledge that the violations were real and should have been corrected when you first reported them. I accepted the position. The promotion was announced on October 15th. Safety Compliance Manager. Direct report to the plant manager. Authority to stop production for safety violations. My supervisor was transferred to a different facility 3 weeks later. The transfer was characterized as a lateral move, but he was no longer in a position to override safety decisions. I spent November implementing the new safety reporting system, direct escalation to plant management, mandatory correction timelines, documentation requirements. The plant manager approved every protocol I recommended. By December, we'd corrected 14 additional safety issues I'd identified. Each one was documented, reviewed, and corrected within the timelines I'd established. No additional OSHA citations were issued. 6 months after my promotion, OSHA closed their investigation. Their final report noted that the facility had implemented comprehensive safety improvements and established effective reporting mechanisms. The $250,000 fine was reduced to $180,000 based on the corrective actions we'd taken. A year after the original complaint, I was managing safety compliance for 3 manufacturing facilities in the region. The position came with additional staff and expanded authority. I'd built a safety program based on the same principle I'd used in my July 15th complaint. Identify violations, document them accurately, and escalate them to people who would take action. The difference was that now I reported to people who understood that correcting safety violations before OSHA found them was cheaper than paying fines after. 2 years after the incident, I was promoted to Director of Safety and Compliance for the company's Eastern operations. I oversaw safety programs at 12 facilities. None of them received OSHA citations during my tenure. 3 years after my supervisor blamed me for the $250,000 fine, I still had all the documentation. My July 15th complaint, his July 18th response, the OSHA citation, the investigator's case file showing someone had filed my complaint with federal regulators. I never found out who filed it with OSHA. But whoever did had used my documentation to trigger an inspection that found exactly what I'd reported internally. My supervisor had ignored the violations and then blamed me when OSHA found them. The plant manager had reviewed the timeline and reached a different conclusion. The incident report had been retracted, the reporting structure had been changed, the safety violations had been corrected. Everything after that had been about building systems that ensured safety violations were addressed when they were first documented, not after federal inspectors arrived with citation books. The $250,000 fine had been expensive, but it had been less expensive than the alternative of continuing to ignore documented violations until someone got hurt. That calculation had been clear from the beginning, back when I'd filed my July 15th complaint with 3 violations, photos, and regulation citations that my supervisor had decided required no action. The federal investigators had disagreed with that assessment, and their disagreement had come with a price tag that made it easier for everyone else to see what I'd been documenting all along.